Hello and welcome to Matcha Mornings, part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network. I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith, and I'm excited to dive deep on topics around holistic health, the power of food, hormone health, how the practices of yoga can impact our health and well-being, and much more. So grab your cup of tea, settle in, and let's get started. Hello, dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Matcha Mornings. I am so excited that you've decided to join me for today's episode of the show. Today on the podcast, I am very excited to be joined by Meghan Pherrill. Meghan is the founder of Balance by Meghan, and she is also a yoga teacher, a meditation teacher, a wellness coach, and an international retreat leader. She is a lover of essential oils, crystals, all things self-love. And on this episode of the podcast, we're going to dive into her health and wellness story. And a big part of Meghan's story is that she suffered from depression and OCD. And on this episode, she really dives into how yoga, meditation, mindfulness, and living a healthier lifestyle really helped her heal and transform. And on this episode, we talk about suffering from mental illness. We also talk about sexual abuse. So if these are topics that are really sensitive or touchy for you, please just be aware that we are going to cover these. And we will talk about how Meghan was able to really heal herself and the trauma that she suffered through the practices that she has in the yoga, meditation, and wellness space. So with that in mind, I hope that you enjoy this episode. And without further ado, here is Meghan. Meghan, welcome to the podcast today. I'm super excited to have you here with me.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's fun to have this conversation for Matcha Mornings because you and I have had, lots of conversations on, offline. We've had a great conversation on social media for mastering the business of yoga. And I just feel like your story is really inspiring. I remember when we did a bonus episode for our shows when we were promoting the retreat that we co-hosted together. I learned about your health and wellness story and your background, and I was just so in awe of it because I think that, if you just meet you in 2020 and, see what you've created with your business and the life that you have with your husband, you seem like, the picture of health and wellness and yoga, and you really embody all of that. But I know that that wasn't always the case for you, and your journey is just so inspiring to hear. So I'm wondering if you can take me through like your health and wellness journey and kind of take me back in time to kind of, I guess, before you were teaching yoga and practicing yoga and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for pointing that out too, because it's something that I think a lot of people are, like you said, they see me and they're like, wow, like you're really bubbly, like you're like so yoga-ish and yoga-ish, I just made that up, but like you're such a yogi, and that is literally like the furthest thing from what I was like growing up. My family they're not healthy people, but just not really rehearsed in a wellness or health, mental mentality, physically, mentally, emotionally. And I had grown up with like diagnosed from birth as having like really severe asthma. Like I had so many respiratory issues. I was in and out of the hospital all the time. Easily I could have an asthma attack, like a severe asthma attack where I'd have to be rushed to the ER once a week. And like they were like, man, like she's a baby. We can't figure out, is there more respiratory issues going on? Like, is it just asthma in the sense of like, why is she having so many asthma attacks? And then, so that stayed with me for quite some time, and I'll talk about how that has since disappeared. But then from the age of, in grade 4, I was diagnosed as having obsessive compulsive disorder, severe depression, and then severe anxiety. And I'm not kidding, like grade 4, I remember going to therapist. I went to a cognitive behavioral therapist and just being like having to tell, my mom had to come in and talk to the principal because I'd be pulled out once a week to go see this doctor. And like our visits were so long. And I was just like, for anyone who doesn't know what OCD is, it's a very compulsive behavior where you have to do something, because if you do not follow through with that routine, something terrible is going to happen. And it's a really hard thing to explain. I've watched a lot of doctors talk about people with OCD and how a lot of people can't come out of it just because it's like, it's ingrained in their brain. And even from what they have talked about, like, it's a very hard thing to explain. So for me, my compulsive was, oh gosh, I had compulsions with everything. The way I had to sit down on the couch 6 times before I could relax. I had to check my bookcases. I had to check my bookcase 40 times before I could go to sleep. This is a weird one. I had to put my underwear on and take it off and put it back on again 3 times before I could put the rest of my clothes on. I had compulsions for everything. And for me, it was, if I don't do these things, my family's going to die. Like, straight up, like, they're going to drop dead. Something horrible is going to happen to them. I'm going to die. They're going to die. Someone's going to die if I do not do these things. And that consumed a lot of my life. And it was this domino effect of, like, a compulsion would go off. I would have to do something. No one in my family could understand why I was doing it. They would get upset. They would get angry at me, which would trigger an asthma attack, which in turn would, okay, now I have to do something so that these asthma attacks don't happen anymore. And a new trigger or a new compulsion would start. And it just kept me in this loop of, it sounds like high anxiety, right? Like, I was just so anxious all the time. And then in grade 7, I was sexually abused by a family member. And that just exasperated everything. Like, my compulsions went to a whole other different level. I could only walk a certain way to school. I couldn't eat, like, Monday I would eat this, Tuesday I would eat this. That could not stray. I had to do, like, my S's in certain ways. Like, I could take a whole podcast episode to talk about what my compulsions were. But it just, everything for me seemed to be falling into place. I was so miserable with my life. I could not get myself to stop these compulsions. I wanted to so desperately, but I was terrified something would happen. And for me, the only way that I could very much express that I needed help desperately was to start self-cutting. So I became a self-cutter. That lasted until grade 10 or 11. At the same time, my uncle, who is no longer part of the family, he was arrested for child sexual abuse. And that is kind of when I started to think, okay, he's out of my life now. You know, this terrible thing that has happened has left my life. Okay, what if, like, more good things can kind of start to happen for me? And it was a grade 12, so I didn't take on any more compulsions. I didn't lose any, but for, a year and a half or so, I didn't gain any. And that was, like, huge. I lost a lot of my high school years. I was terrified to sleep over at people's houses because the sexual abuse had happened when I slept over at my aunt's house. So I wouldn't sleep over at people's houses. I didn't go on any trips. That was out of my norm for me. So it wasn't something I could do. And in grade 12, I hit a point of just enough is enough. I was so miserable, and I contemplated suicide a few times just because I was like, this life sucks and I don't want to do it anymore. And it was really like, do you really want to kill yourself, Meghan? Like, that's a final decision. There is no coming back from this. And the answer was no. I had seen people in high school who were happy. People were going off and experiencing different experiences. They were going to college, they were traveling. And I was just like, there has to be a way for me to do this. And I have no concise way to explain how this happened other than just mindset. And I just stopped. And I've gone in for studies. I've been tested at the University of Toronto to say, how did this girl do this? Like, how did she just stop her OCD, especially being as bad as it was? And I made a decision I wasn't going to do it anymore. And it was hard. I'd like be triggered to want to do something and be like, just don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And I told my parents, I was like, Mom, Dad, like if I go to do something, you have to like just stop me. Just sit me down and say, Megan, like, no, you said you were going to do this. Like, let's just breathe through it. And when I was like 15, so a little backtrack, my mom had tried to take me to yoga, and it never stuck with me. I couldn't breathe through my nose with all my asthma issues. I was a constant mouth breather. That's something I'm still working on. And she was like, at the very least, if it doesn't help you mentally, like maybe it'll help you control your breathing. And maybe it did. I don't think I was in the mindset for it at the time. But when I stopped doing all my compulsions, I had started to come off my medication. So I was on really heavy medication that was more or less like a tranquilizer. So I was sleeping all the time. I wasn't really happy, but I wasn't really sad. I was just present. And that's also not a way to live your life. So I started to, and like anyone who's listening and you're on medication, like don't do this. My doctor was infuriated with me. I stopped my medication. Like I just stopped, which is never recommended. If you can't tell, like I'm a very extreme person and it was just like, we're going all in on this. So it was like, I'm stopping the OCD, I'm stopping my medication. And it was hard. Anyone who has done that before will tell you it's very, like I went through withdrawal. I was sick, I was shaky, I was throwing up, I had constant headaches, because it's very much just stopping a tranquilizer, like any sort of MDMA or, horse tranquilizer. If you're on that for a very long time, it's very hard to come off of it. Your body goes into shock, more or less. But it was just every day it would stop and it would be like, oh, that's one day down. I can do another day. And then another day, and then another day. And at this time, I had met who is now my husband, Brad, and he had been on the same medication a few years before me. He had tried to take his own life, and he was just same kind of story as mine. He was just fed up. He was done. He had OD'd, and he was brought back to life. But that for him was such a wake-up call. And he was like, Megan, you can do this. Like, I was like a miserable, I don't know if I can swear on here, but it bitch. And
you can swear if you want.
I was a miserable bitch. And he was just like, no, I know this is going to stop. I know in a few weeks, like you're going to be back to normal. And in a few weeks, like I was feeling really good. I was off my medication completely. I was awake a lot and I was just bored. I was like, man, like usually I would nap for 3 hours at this time. Like, what am I going to do? And that for me is when yoga came into place. And yoga is really what spiraled everything else for me. But I started as like a workout. I wanted like power. I wanted to like sweat. And I just like rolled out my crappy Walmart mat. Went into the basement and I threw on like a 20-minute power yoga class. And it kicked my butt. Like, although I've always been like a smaller person, I'm 5'2". I've usually ranged in like the 105 pound area. I was not healthy in the least bit. Like I could very easily get by on like chicken fingers and fries for the rest of my life at that point. And it kicked my butt. And I was like, this is yoga. Like, why is this so hard for me to do? And it was just, this video, I was like, I have to get through this video without stopping or without, cursing and swearing. And I was just like, I'm going to do this video 3 times a week to start until I can master it. Then I'll move on to another video. And 3 times a week turned into like 4 days a week. And then 4 days a week turned into 7 days a week. And I just noticed so many changes so fast. Physically in my body, yes, I was definitely getting stronger. I was definitely getting more flexible. But my mind was starting to go a little bit more quiet. And it was, I could go to my mat being very angry or depressed, and I would leave feeling the opposite way. I would be happy. I would be joyful. I would be like, even if it wasn't like all those extreme, like all those things, I was just not as angry as when I left. Or I'd have an answer to like a problem I was having. And I was like, there is something to this yoga that's so much more than just a workout to me at the time. And this is like, that is where my yoga journey started.
Just want to say, thank you for sharing so candidly. I know it's not easy to talk about things that are near and dear to us and personal to us. And also just express, like, I just don't think it's okay in any way for people to, violate other people physically. And I just, like, it breaks my heart that you had to go through that so young. And I'm just like, just so amazed by the fact that you've been able to get yourself to where you are. Cause I think there's a lot of people where, mental sickness, mental health, physical abuse, sexual trauma, like it really wrecks them. Like it really kind of shatters their world. And that's not my life experience. And so it's so hard for me to even put myself in that position, but I just can't even imagine like how much mental strength it takes to pull yourself out of those depths and be like, I'm going to keep walking this walk and I'm going to keep doing this thing.
Yeah. And, I've heard stories way worse than even mine. And I've heard people like say exactly that. It's so unbelievable to me that you're this person now, that you went through all this. I had one girl, and only ever one girl, but it sticks so much in my mind. That was like, I don't believe you. I don't believe that another human being could do that. And it was like, there's obviously something going on with you that you like this, you can't open yourself up to. Unfortunately, a lot of the world has a dysfunctional family. And I think it was Jack Canfield. I'm gonna get his last name wrong. He's the author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul guy.
Okay. Yeah.
Author.
Yeah. I know
And
those books.
he was saying in a documentary that, psychologists believe that 86% or so of the population have dysfunctional families. So whether it's verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, drugs and alcohol are involved in the family, or, and that's not the case for everybody, but I would feel like on some level, people have like, that family member, or, so-and-so it drinks a little bit too much. Like there's something I think that a lot of people experience in their lives, and maybe not. And maybe this is a total shock to some people. But for me, it was, being 19, 20 and like, is this going to be the rest of my life? Like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. Like, this is not what life is supposed to be about. And I never really understood that concept until, later in years, where it's like, life is supposed to be abundant in all sorts of ways. But for me, I knew deep down, like, that was not life. And you almost for me, I got so sick and tired of being so sad and tired all the time. Like, I didn't want to be in my own company. And that was very much like, okay, well then what are you going to do about this? And it's been a journey. Like, it's not like, I mean, I say overnight, like my compulsion stopped. It was an ongoing thing for a very long time. Yes, I stopped them almost completely in one day, but it wasn't like those demons didn't come out and go like, hey, if you don't twist this doorknob the right way, your mom's going to drop dead. And it would be like, is that really going to happen? Come on. Like, does that make sense? Like, no, Megan, like, just, it's just your mind, push forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. One of my really good friends is going through some compulsion stuff with her toddler right now. And it's really challenging to see her go through that as a friend. And also I imagine like with a small child who can't rationalize that way that you were able to as you got older. Like, it's just so hard to think about those things. But I also think that, it's really incredible that you were able to like shift your mindset. And I think it's a testament to how powerful our minds are. Like
Mm-hmm.
our minds control our lives, really. Mindset can be so powerful in having a good day versus a bad day, and getting that dream job or creating your dream business versus not doing that. And I certainly understand that there's lots and lots of things that can hold people back and make that harder, such as mental illness, depression, anxiety, things like OCD. But I think that you're a great example of somebody who has gone through a lot and you know probably still deals with some of those demons and is able to make that choice every day. Like, okay, I know that there's, things to live for. And I know that I can do these things that make me feel happy. And I think that that's just very inspiring to hear.
Thank you. My goal is just, I've never shied away from sharing my story because I want people to take something away from it, whether it changes their life or whether they just go, okay, this is something I need to work on. Like, I want people to know, like, I was in the darkest place in my life, and you can come out of it. Whatever is going on for me right now, like, I'm playing a lot with like manifestation and like the law of attraction, and mindset has been absolutely huge. And I don't know if you know this, because I feel like there's always every time we talk, I'm like, oh God, I forgot to tell her this, or like this is going on in my life. But I was diagnosed at the age of 20 of having cervical cancer. And whether or not this came from, I had issues before when I started to get sexually abused. And because I didn't tell my parents for the long time, in my heart, I know I contracted some stuff from him, but I didn't say anything for a long time. I was terrified to say, hey, things are hurting down there.
Mm-hmm.
And I just never told anyone until it was later. And it was like, well, one doctor's like, there's a good chance that that's where it did come from, but we just like, you'll never know. And, I go in and it's like, it's terrifying to being told like, wow, you have like a lot of cancerous cells in your body. We're going to have to do biopsies. I was like, okay, like, what does this mean? And he's like, it means that, your cells are showing that they could go one of two ways. You're going to have cancer, or, it might turn around. And for 5 years, I would go in and be like, your cells are worse. Okay, do some biopsies. They take samples of it. It still could go both either way, and he was a very positive doctor. He's like remove stress from your life. And you're like, okay, doc, like, how do I do that at the age of 20? But he was like, just, you gotta start being more positive. You gotta start thinking happier thoughts. Like, try not to be in a state of stress. Like, that's all I can tell you. And I know it's not going to mean a lot to you right now. Try to remove yourself from stressful situations. And it was 5 years of going to see the doctor. And it was in the last year of going to see him, it's when I started to become in a really good space. I was happy in my life. I had I think he was a boyfriend, maybe a fiance at the time, who just loved me. We were, planning our life together. I was feeling really, really good. And he goes in with the microscope and he's like, holy crap. And I was like, what? He's like, the cells are gone. Like, I've never seen anything go so quickly in a year. He's like, like, I don't, like, we're gonna monitor this for a bit, but like, I don't have to do a biopsy on you this time around. Things are looking really good. Like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm just like, I'm happy. Like, I know you told me this could be cancerous, but I'm choosing to be in a better space. That's the way it's gonna go. That's the way it's gonna go. There's a lot of cancer in my family. Like, I could have very much held on to, well, like, everybody in my family has cancer, so like, that's just the way it's going to be. And I think a lot of it is I just accepted it and thought, okay, like, life goes on. Like, how do we deal with this? Both my parents have had cancer, and they've been in a really good mindset, positive space when they had it. And I think I just took some of that on, and I would go for follow-ups, and he's like, he was a specialist too. And he was like, you don't have to see me anymore. You can go back to your regular doctor. I'm going to send everything to him so he can keep up on this. But like, you are clear. And it was just like, holy crap. Like, this, I really wasn't sure for a few years if I was going to, there's, you might not be able to have kids. And it was like, I'm having kids. Like, some point in my life, I don't know when, but like, that's not an option. I'm having kids. So like, how do we deal with this? And it's just, like, I've been clear now for 4 years. I think I was 25 when the final test came back, and it was like, no, you're clear. And I've been clear ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I didn't know that. And that's just, yeah, an incredible testament to how mindset impacts, our physical body. And I don't know if you've read Gabor Mate's work. Do you know of his stuff?
No, but I'm like such a bookaholic right now. Like, I need to read
Yeah,
it.
he's got some really interesting stuff. on how stress and trauma manifests in the body,
Hmm.
and how like his work is a lot about how disease and illness is really like manifested from trauma and stress. And there's also another book that I really love that kind of talks about this concept. I can't remember what the author's name is, but it's called The Body Heaps the Score. And
Oh,
that
so
is
good.
all about, how essentially like every trauma that we go through in our life is stored in our tissues.
Hmm.
And this is stuff that's not directly talked about in the philosophies of yoga, but I feel like it definitely gets like touched on, or concepts get touched on in maybe a more like esoteric way. You know, as yoga teachers, like we know that there's certain poses that make us feel different ways or bring up emotions or memories, and it's because we're getting into these parts of our bodies where we store these things. And I feel like one of the things that's been really, I think, eye opening for me and just makes a lot of sense to me as well as I went through my own yoga journey was thinking about how the physical body is really a reflection of everything else that's happening in our world and in our life. And we can't go through something like sexual abuse and not have that be in our tissues and not be in our cells. And I think that your story is just such a, I mean, it's like a tragic, but also like a beautiful example of how healing that trauma can actually heal that physical illness and physical disease that is in the body. And so thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, no, no worries. And it's funny too, even thinking of that, like sexual abuse, like what is that directly connected to? It's like your sexual organs, your hips, like that all area. And like that's exactly where it manifested for me. Like even now on the flip side of it, like hip opening stuff is like my favorite thing. It's like one that I'm like, oh my God, like this hurts, but it feels so good. And it's like that's like sexual abuse tends to happen in, like, if you know anything about the chakra system, it's like that sacral chakra. It's like that, just below the belly button. It's where like the sexual organs are. It's where, like, fertility happens. It's that water element. And like to me, there's no, like, it's not a coincidence that I went through all of that. I'm like, that is a direct manifestation, if you will, of a disease that happened, and it's manifested now in my body, and now it's
Mm-hmm.
gone.
Hey everyone, we're taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about Muse. Muse tracks your brain during meditation to give you real-time feedback on your meditation, guiding you into the zone and solving the major problem that most of us have when starting a meditation practice. Muse lets you know when you're doing it right. Your Muse headband basically acts like your personal assistant. While you meditate, Muse measures whether your mind is calm or active and translates that data into sounds. When you're calm, you'll hear peaceful sounds, and when your mind wanders, the sounds will intensify, guiding you back to a calm state. So if you're like me, where you have a really solid meditation practice and you love to do it every day or every couple of days, but sometimes you just find that you really can't get in the rhythm because your mind is so busy, Muse might be for you. The best part about this is that I have a 15% discount off just for listeners of Matcha Mornings. So head on over to bit.ly/Matcha Mornings Muse to get your discount. All right, back to the episode. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you should definitely check out The Body Keeps the Score and Gabor Mate's work, because I think that it's very in line with what you're talking about. And I think very much what you believe in terms of physical healing and manifestation and stuff like that. And yeah, it's so powerful. And I think that one of the things that I always have to constantly remind myself of, which is funny being a yoga teacher, is like, the power of breath, the power of movement, the power of meditation. If we are bothered by something or something's going on, I think that tuning into what's happening in your body and being able to be, quiet with that and feel what needs to be felt, and tuning into that can be one of the most healing things that we can do for ourselves. I think in like 2020, a lot of people, maybe things are shifting a little bit in the circles that you and I kind of run in, but I think in general, it's like, people feel something or something's going on and they immediately go to a doctor. And
Mhm.
I am definitely not saying don't go to your doctor, because, there are things that doctors can save our lives for. Absolutely. But I think like before, just band-aiding things with medications and antibiotics and, pill after pill after pill. It's like remembering that our bodies want to be in this state of homeostasis. They want to be healthy, and we can heal them if we trust them a little bit.
Yeah. There's in that same documentary I was watching, it's something I truly believe, like disease, like, and again, if you break it down, dis-ease in the body, like it doesn't happen in a happy body. Like there's just no way that disease can form in a body that is fully happy, healthy, and functional. It just there's and stress absolutely can be a huge factor in it. And I would say it's probably the biggest factor in disease happening in the body. And in 2020, like I'd be hard pressed to find someone who's like 10 years, never been stressed in my entire life. Like it happens, but it's how do we deal with those stresses? And I'm also a big fan of like feel your feelings, like don't keep them cooped up, but it's feel your feelings, for an hour, for 5 minutes, for a day even. And then like, what's the next step? How do we move forward? How do we not stay in the space of, just stagnant energy or sadness? Like, how do we move forward? And, like dare I even say, how do we find gratitude in some of these situations? That was a hard concept. Even my family, even now, I have said, I have found gratitude in what has happened to me. And my mom is like, no, like she can't understand it. And she has manifested breast cancer. And I truly believe it's because she is so resentful of what happened to our family from all of this, in the sense that, like our family a lot of us crumbled apart. There's a lot of us that don't speak to each other. My grandfather at the time of all of this was a police officer, and that was very hard for him to, like, it happening right under his nose. I think that really took a toll on him. And I'm like, Mom, like you have to just, I'm not saying like forget or even forgive him for what he's done, like say, okay, like go off and do your own thing, but like forgive it for yourself. Like for me, I'm like gratitude in the sense, like I didn't kill myself when I wanted to. He has 2 young daughters. He doesn't see them anymore, but thank God nothing happened to them. Thank God I didn't end up pregnant. Thank God I didn't end up with incurable diseases from this. Even what I did get, it's now gone. So it's like I've been able to find gratitude, and I think that's really hard for a lot of people to do. And I think it can be one of the biggest shifts if you can find even a glimmer of gratitude in a darker situation. I think it can move you forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's like a very courageous and brave thing to do, and also a very hard thing to do. But I do feel like I heard this from somebody. I don't know if it's a quote or whatnot. It's definitely not, my original thought, but, forgiveness for me is a challenging thing. And that's in the sense of like somebody really wronging me or doing something that makes me feel like I've been wronged. But somebody told me once, like, you're not doing yourself any favors by not forgiving, because that person doesn't know that they're not forgiven, right? Like your
Yeah.
uncle did something horrible, absolutely horrible. Obviously he pays through the justice system, but by you holding on to that, or your mom holding on to that, like he doesn't feel that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
impact him, it impacts you guys.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the biggest, bravest things that we can do to forgive somebody, and especially in that situation. I mean, just thinking about my own life, I think I would find it so challenging to forgive somebody who physically sexually abused me. And obviously I can't 100% speak to that, since that's not my truth, but I just imagine, based on things that I have a hard time letting go of that are way, way less than that, I think it would be so hard. But I would imagine, like, not only do you feel this physical freedom from that, but also this mental freedom. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the stuff that like clogs up our physical mental space. That's the stuff that, you know, creates cancer in the body. It's toxins in the body. It's poison for our body, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's yeah, like you said it so well. Like that person is not feeling any harm that they hurt you. I mean, maybe they are, but there's a good chance he's not sitting there every single day going like, oh God, I hope they forgive me. Like he's probably moved on with his life. And it's like, I want to too. And I've been working very hard with my mom to kind of let that go. And she is okay. Like it's been, when was she diagnosed? She was diagnosed the same year I got married. She was actually diagnosed a week before our wedding.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yeah, no, that's a whole story in itself. She didn't, and I knew something was wrong, but she didn't tell me until after the wedding. And, my dad knew, obviously. My husband had caught her crying, I think, and she had told him, and he was like, frig, man, like, how am I not supposed to say something to my wife? And she's in a good space now. Again, they're not the healthiest people in the sense, and that's a whole other thing. I'm really, it was like, that saying, like, you can take a horse to the watering hole, but like you can't, I always butcher it. You can't like drag them to it. Like you can show them where it is, but they have to go on your own.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were like very resistant to all of this. And it was like, I'm moving ahead. You can either join me or you can't, or you don't want to. And very slowly, like I feel like they're like dragging their feet going to the watering hole, but like they are moving there. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
progress.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's like with everyone in our lives. I mean, we can kind of like show them the light, but we can't make them walk towards it. And you got to trust that people will come in their own time. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that by you being an example for your parents and for your family, like, they'll eventually get there. But it's certainly like challenging when you're like, hey guys, I got like the magic pill over here. Just come
I
walk
know.
towards me and come get it. I got it. But,
I
people really do have to find, yoga, spirituality, mindfulness, healing. They have to find that stuff in their own time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, over the last couple of years, I know you've really dove into your yoga journey as a yoga teacher. Can you tell me a little bit about like why you decided to become a yoga teacher?
Yeah. So, like I was saying, yoga changed my life. I was just like, wow. I mean, I can't believe I feel so good from a, like quote unquote, a workout to me. And I watched a lot of like yoga with Adrienne, and she always infused like philosophy into her mat, or into her mat, into her flows, into her classes. And it was just, you know, every time something big or something little would resonate with me. And I'm like, yeah, like I do feel like that. Yeah, like I can see how this, compassion wins over, hatred, or whatever it is that she would say. And then it was just like such a profound experience for me. And it had absolutely changed my life that I was like, I need to share this with the world. And so I took my yoga teacher training. It changed my life. Like I did my 200 hours, and then I did my 300 hours. So I'm a 500-hour certified yoga teacher. And I always say, like, I cried in like the first 200 hours, like every time, like just something, like it would just, my mind would shift. It would be blown open. I would just get something. I will also say I had an incredible yoga teacher training program. Like the lady who ran it, she had great teachers who ran different parts of the training, and the teachers were amazing. I learned so much from them. And for me, what had started off as like, I I wanted to be that yogi who was like on the beach doing cool yoga poses and like running my own yoga studio, if you will. I kind of like had a little taste of that. So I won't dive super into this, but like I ended up on the tiny island of Aruba teaching for a little bit. And I was teaching for the lady who used to mentor Yoga Girl, or Rachel Brathen. And I was just, hearing some of the stories, or like people would come up to me afterwards. And I went into teacher training knowing I wanted to teach too. That was another thing. I think a lot of people go just to deepen their own practice, which I think is an incredible thing. And it definitely happened for me. But I went in with the intention of, I'm coming out as a teacher and I'm going to teach. So I ended up in Aruba. I was teaching under the mentor of Yoga Girl, or Rachel Brathen. And people would come up to me after class and they'd be like, that class like moved me so much. I always infuse philosophy into my classes, even though I do teach a lot of stronger classes. Like they are, I guess you can consider them more like power yoga or like stronger vinyasa flows. But for me, I love just dropping a little bit of wisdom or nuggets. Sometimes they're just affirmations. Like, I try to set an affirmation for the class, and, some people love them. Some people like didn't resonate with me today. Like I use something else. But for the people who were like, yes, this affirmation just spoke to me today. I really needed to hear it. It just made me feel so good. And I knew that I had to keep sharing this. And it's like, it's been a journey. I still don't know what the end product will look like, but I love teaching. Like even though it's hard, even though there's been tons of ups and downs as being like an entrepreneur, it's my happy space. I come in the mat ready to teach, and I'm just like all smiles because I hope it changes somebody's life, and maybe that's a lot to put on for one class, but if it changes their way of thinking, or it just puts them in a better mood, or even if it's just like, that workout was great. I'm like, great. If it keeps you coming back, then I know there's magic to this. And at some point I'm going to catch you and you're going to be like, this is when it changed my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I think too, it's like we can kind of like sprinkle these little seeds with people with the things that we share in our classes. And I think about my own yoga journey. Like I did yoga for the first time when I was 18, and I was a competitive dancer. I was super flexible. I was very fit. Like it just felt like pretty much nothing to me. I don't think I got like anything out of that. But a seed was planted at that point.
Yeah.
And then it took many years before I think I really started to understand the true benefits of yoga outside of the physical practice.
Yeah.
And, then it took probably, years after that, a couple more years before I started to really understand the depth of yoga and how yoga is more than just the asana. And I felt like after I did my 200-hour, one of the things that was both intimidating and also very intriguing to me about the practice of yoga and the teachings of yoga is I felt like the well is so deep, and I still feel this way. The well is so deep. I don't think that I'll ever fully grasp all the concepts of yoga, both on the mat, off the mat, philosophically, physically. Like there is so much to learn, which is really, really cool. And I don't know, as a teacher myself, I think about how, maybe I can just be that first initial seed for somebody. And even if the plant doesn't grow in my presence, I just got to trust that that's happening. And I think that that's one of the best things we can do as yoga teachers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a never ending process, which I think is great. It's like, you know, I try to infuse, I won't say all of the yoga. The eight limbs is kind of where I was taught in the philosophy I know. Some of them are easier than others, but I try to live my days from the eight limbs. And sometimes it's one concept, sometimes it's, multiple. But even when I say when I was 15 and my mom took me to yoga class and didn't resonate with me, obviously looking back now, it resonated with me years later, but that seed was planted. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe you have someone come to your class and you never see them again, but then 5 years later they like trek back in and you're like, wow, like, you've planted that seed for them. And yeah, for me too, a lot of it, like I'm learning that it's not so much more than just the asanas, and I still love a good power class. Like I do, for me, like I love a good workout, and it usually revolves around like a yoga, if you will. I'm using air quotes, you can't see, but a yoga workout. But like
Yeah.
meditation has also been huge for me. And, just my 18-year-old chicken finger fry loving self would just be like, she would be appalled about like what I eat now, because like everything is like fruits and vegetables. And I will say I'm like a pickier eater. Like I'm very like, I'll try things, but like I'm very like, I don't like sauces, and I think that like weirds people out. Like condiments, sauces, I'm like, please don't add that to my stuff. Like I don't want that. But I'm much more adventurous than I used to be, and like I always have vegetables with my meals, not in breakfast, but like, dinner especially, but lunch too. And like, I'll drink a fruit smoothie, and like such foreign concepts to like my 18-year-old self. That would be like, you're having like, is it chocolate? Is it an ice cap? Like, what are we drinking here? And it's like, no, it's a fruit smoothie.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I can totally resonate with that. I mean, I lived in residence my first year at university, and then in my second year, I moved into a house with roommates. And I mean, there was many dinners where I ate like a full bag of chips. I'm not talking like an individual size because I'm like, this is dinner. I need like,
I need
I remember
bag.
one time I ate a full bag of chips and like a caramel bar. And my roommates were like, is that what you're going to eat? And I was like, I don't really feel like cooking anything. And I also didn't know how to cook. So
Yeah.
yes, you and I have both come a long way. And I'm just giggling at your sauce thing because I'm like the total opposite. I'm like that person where it's like, I guess I should put like noodles with my pasta because that's like the appropriate thing to do. And I guess I should like use chips to scoop the guacamole,
Just
the
like sit
salsa.
there. Yeah.
They're definitely just like utensils for my sauce.
You and I would do really well like on a patio and stuff. Like, we would order like chips and salsa, and like it would balance it out, because I'd probably have like chips with like a little bit of salsa, and then you could like, spoon up the salsa if you wanted to.
Yeah. I'm like the one that like fills the scoops. Like, the scoops chips, like I
Yeah.
like fill the scoop. People who just like kind of dab it, I'm like, I don't get what you're doing here. So yes, we would be perfect for that. Amazing. Megan, I have loved this conversation and just really, really appreciate your realness, your authenticity, your willingness to share. And it's just so inspiring to hear your story. And I'm so excited to see, where you continue to take your business. And on that note, I would love for you to share with listeners where people can go to find you, everything you have going on, from if they want to practice with you, to work with you, join you on YouTube, join you live for a session, all that good stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. This has been such a fun conversation. I love talking with like-minded people. And I love what you're doing with Matcha Mornings. I've been a huge fan of yours from Mastering the Business of Yoga. I think what you're doing is incredible. But if anyone wants to, follow me on social media, my handle is at Balance by Meghan, Meghan. That's across all social media platforms. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, I believe. If you want to follow me on YouTube, I have a ton of stuff on YouTube. That's same thing, Balance by Meghan. You can find, power yoga flows on there, vinyasa flows, gentle yoga, meditations. I've been doing a lot of meditations on there. I have workshops that have been popping up. I just did one last week for meditation, and that seems to be that's something I think I'm going to keep offering, is meditation workshops, because I think more of us need it. So you can always, find my website, www.balancebymeghan.com. You can check out my workshops there. You can join the email list, get all the goodies. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Thank you so much. I'll make sure there's links to all of that in the show notes. And thank you again for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. I hope that you've enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Meghan Pherrill. I hope that you are feeling both touched and hopefully empowered from that episode, and inspired to maybe do some healing and transformation in your life. Two quick things before we wrap up the podcast. Since Meghan and I recorded, she actually launched a Yoga on Demand online membership. It is $10 and it is hosted on Patreon. And this is all about yoga, meditation from anywhere and at any time. And it's really designed for the modern day yogi, the modern day woman who's looking for a variety of different classes at a really affordable rate. So you can head on over to Balance by Meghan, Meghan, to learn more about that. And of course, there's links on the show notes over at wanderbarn.com. The second announcement is that over at Wanderbarn, we are really excited to have brought on a brand new podcast. It is called People Talking People, and it's hosted by Randolyn Hill and Jennifer Maynard. And this is a podcast that is all about people, as you may have guessed from the title of the show. And as of the time of recording right now, There are 4 episodes available for the podcast. The first one, you get to know a little bit about Randy and Jen, the 2 hosts of the show, why they're passionate about talking about people and what you can expect from the podcast. Then they talk about leadership, what makes people worth following, and they also talk about Randy's recent career transition. So something that's really cool about this show is that there's some episodes with Randy and Jen, and then there's some episodes where they're doing it solo. So if you want to have a listen, which I would definitely encourage you to do, head on over to wanderbarn.com/podcast/people talking people, or go on to wanderbarn.com. And under our podcast, you'll see it. It's right on the homepage. We are super, super excited to have it a part of the network. And it's an absolute honor to have People Talking People be a sister show to Matcha Mornings. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you check out what Megan's up to, and also check out Randy and Jen's new show, People Talking People. And I will see you soon. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Matcha Mornings. To find links mentioned in this episode, show notes, photos, and more, head on over to wanderbarn.com/podcast/matcha-mornings. To be the first to know about brand new episodes of Matcha Mornings, subscribe on your podcast app. If you enjoyed this episode of the show, please leave a review or send me an email at wanderbarn@gmail.com with the subject line Matcha Mornings. To follow along with me, Amanda Kingsmith, you can find me on Instagram at Amanda Kingsmith to learn more about other fun projects I'm working on. To find more great podcasts like this one on topics such as travel, the business of yoga, cryptocurrency, and more, head on over to wanderbarn.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.